In this world, there are a few different types of people. The people who love finds, the people who find love, and the people who love eludes. Whether they elude it or love eludes them, that just happens to be something that can happen in life. But no matter where in the world those people find themselves, finding that right one can definitely be a complicated topic. And of course, this week on Not Your Average Globetrotter, I wanted to talk about finding love abroad, dating abroad. But of course, sometimes there are no right or wrong answers. Sometimes there are no answers at all. But let's jump into this topic from the perspective of me, somebody who's been living abroad for about 14 years now. Roll that intro. All right, well, first things first, change the lights up to red, set the mood just a little bit. While living abroad, I've seen that there are people who view dating abroad a number of different ways. Some people see it as more like a novelty, that you're just doing it just for the experience of it, but not taking it quite seriously. Some people are looking for just a little bit of fun while they're in another part of the world. And then there are other people who maybe take it a little bit more seriously and are looking for something a little bit more long lasting, a little bit deeper. Having personally lived my adult life outside of the US, I can say that dating abroad for me has just been my baseline, that basically anybody who I end up dating is going to be from another country. Even though I am from the US, that even the few times that I have dated other Americans, there's been some cultural differences. I come from the US, but I didn't grow up in the most American environment. So there are times when there are cultural differences and things that come up that are a bit, for lack of a better word, foreign to me. And of course, I'm not saying in this episode at all that I have the right answers to everything. I just have certain strong opinions and feelings about things. And of course, if you disagree with me, you can definitely let me know down in the comment section below. Of course, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, there's no problem there. And hey, maybe I'll find out that I'm actually wrong about something and be able to find a better way of moving through life. But while dating somebody who comes from another country, or even your own while living in another country, you may find that there are little things that come up that you have to learn about and get used to, or things that maybe at the end of the day are very small, or things that are maybe very large. I mean, one nice thing about dating somebody from your own country is that at the end of the day, or maybe not even your own country, but your own culture, I'll say that, because sometimes two people from two different parts of the world can be part of the same cultural community. Maybe one of them is from the diaspora of the other nation, or maybe they're both part of the same religious group, and there could be similarities shared between each one of them. Maybe things are done a little bit differently. And kind of what I'm talking about at the end of the day, in a lot of the episodes of Not Your Average Globetrotter, some of the smallest things end up being the largest things. Some of the things that you may see as so completely insignificant, when they build up, can make a big difference. I mean, maybe this isn't the best example here, but there was one time about maybe 10 years ago or so, I was dating this one woman, and yeah, things were looking pretty serious at the time, and she invited me to come on a trip to go visit her grandparents. And just for a little bit of a kind of context here, this part of this woman's family was French Moroccans. And so for me, as somebody who likes Middle Eastern and some North African flavors, I was definitely very interested and very curious. And in the back of my mind, I was kind of hoping that maybe I'd get to learn a little bit about something, or maybe that we'd end up having some really delicious food. Like, she was telling me her grandmother was an amazing cook. And of course, when it comes to a grandmother from certain cultures, there are just certain things you don't argue with when it comes to food. And of course, I was very curious. So anyway, we take the long trip to get up to her grandparents' place, and we get picked up by her uncle. And anyway, that's not even important. We get to the home where we're staying at, her grandparents' home. Beautiful home, just recently built and everything. And the layout of the home was that the kitchen and the living room were like the bottom floor of this whole building, the standalone home, were open to one another, but they were on opposite sides of the building itself. So each area was somewhat separate from one another. But anyway, so the first area that you walk into is the kitchen, and I guess dining room to an extent. And so we get there, and I'm really excited, and like, her grandmother's already starting to cook for the meal for that night and the next day. Like, she's going, she's really at it. But I see that she's not completely finished with everything, and also we're just kind of getting in there. We're all chit-chatting and kind of also, there was a bit of a language barrier, but whatever, that we ended up working through that. So, of course, me being somebody who does enjoy cooking, I offered to help. And so this ended up putting this grandmother on tilt. Like, what? Why would he want to be in here? This is my place. This is the place where the women are. Of course, he needs to go out and be in the living room with the men watching TV. But of course, my response was like, I like cooking. What do you mean? And she's like, what do you mean you like cooking? You're a man. You're supposed to be in the living room. You're not supposed to be in the kitchen. This is my territory. So anyway, after a little bit of chit-chatting and then also convincing from her granddaughter, the woman that I was with, she was like, she kind of reluctantly said, okay, fine, you can be in here. But that was kind of the first mistake there, offering and asking if I could help. But also I'll admit that the TV that was playing, it was not playing in any language that I was interested in. None of the men were chit-chatting with each other. And also, if there was a language barrier between myself and her grandmother, there was an even bigger barrier between myself and her grandfather and uncle. So I was happy to be in the kitchen. So she had me doing a few things and helping her stirring pots and this and that and the other. And then eventually she gives me a big pile of vegetables. And she's like, all right, chop this. Then she said, the knife's in the drawer. Go get it. I'm like, all right, fine. So I get this knife and I start chopping away at the vegetables. And so I'm there chopping vegetables. We're all having a good time and it's going well. And then her grandmother says, oh, I need that knife just for 1 second. Can you pass it over to me? So without thinking about it, I grab it so that the hilt, that the handle is facing towards her. And she jumps and screams and says, no, put it down. It's like, but wait, you just told me to pass it to you. So I'm passing it to you. She's like, no, put it down. What are you doing? She flipped out. This was my second mistake. And the mistake that I made was assuming that everybody hands a knife to another person in the same way by handing them the handle, the hilt, handing them the non-sharp part of the blade and doing it directly. That to me was normal growing up. So there are going to be things also that you may come across in your travels that you might not even ever think about because it's just a different form of logic. Logic is not something that is a constant throughout the universe. There will be certain things that they have a different approach to. So let me explain why she freaked out was because in her culture that if you're handing something sharp to somebody else, you put it down close to the person or as close as possible and allow them to pick it up themselves. It's kind of a similar reason why you don't necessarily hand somebody a knife by the blade first, but it's just a different approach to it, adding in an extra level of protection. But I was definitely confused in the moment and it was funny because I was like, so what happened? What's going on here? And of course, the woman who I'm dating at the time, she's laughing her butt off because she knows what's going on and she sees this guy making all of these cultural mistakes. Looking back on this embarrassing moment now, I can only laugh at that. And there are things that I would say that if you are going to spend time abroad and spend time with other people in their culture, there's going to be a lot of learning to do. Even if you come from similar cultures or similar backgrounds, there might be bits and pieces that are just done in a different way. Like I said, some of them can be big, some of them can be little, and some of them you may have to explain. But it's not just about your being open-minded about this. You also have to consider that the other person has to be just as open-minded to you. And so this actually, I would say, could make it difficult that if you are from country A and the person is from country B and you both end up being in country B, that person may have certain expectations of you that they would have for that person from that country, or that you have to live up to those standards. But if you are from country A, the person who you're with is from country B, and you're in a third party country C that has nothing to do with either one of you, that actually, in my opinion, as someone who's never been married, but has seen couples together and seen successful marriages together, that it could lead to an easier time because both of you are having to figure some of these things out. Maybe some things will be difficult for one person than for the other person, but it's not necessarily that that's even a fact to begin with, because with each different couple, this is going to change. And I'm not talking from any kind of purely expert position here. I'm single. I can't say that I've had luck in the dating world. Well, depends on how you look at it. Maybe I could say I've had luck to not end up with the wrong woman. but I haven't had luck to find the right woman. So both lucky and unlucky at the same time, depending on how you look at it. In the words of the old Ben Kenobi, from a certain point of view, definitely the epitome of retcon. Anyway, different topic. I'm getting a little bit too nerdy here. But there will be times when you find that there are things between you that you are going to be open to, or expectations based on your culture, based on where you're from, or maybe not even them. Maybe you're somebody who would be a little bit more countercultural and that you are not typical for the type of person for where you're from, and that you have certain ways of going about things, or certain things that are normal for you, or certain ways of communicating. And there may be people from some parts of the world that are more communicative than others, that may have it be more of a cultural norm that you express what you're feeling when you're feeling it and how you're feeling it, or if you do express what you're feeling, that you express it in maybe a very loud way, or maybe even in a very quiet way. I mean, I can say that's definitely happened to me, that if there's something important, that I have got the tendency personally to be very calm about it, but I've dated women that have, if something comes up, it's immediately the time to start getting loud and shouting about it. But for me, I personally rather have a very calm conversation about things, and sometimes maybe a little bit detached, and that can be seen as very cold for some people. But that's just something for me that is part of how I was raised. I realize very un-Italian, but while I may be both Italian and Latin and other things mixed in there, I can say there are certain things from certain cultures that have crept their way in that may be a little bit unusual for that. But even it can be things that, again, talking about things that you maybe never even thought about before, or even talking about another woman that I dated once. And we're not talking about huge amounts of women here. We're just whatever. I'm not like this Don Juan, like going out. Like, no, I'm the type of person that if I'm in something, I'm investing my time, because I work a lot. I don't have a lot of free time. If I have free time, I have to give it to myself. So if I'm somewhere, that means that I am spending time that I could otherwise be doing something else to build up my life. So anyway, my time is very important to me, and it's valuable to me. And actually, time is an investment for me. And so for me, that is a mindset that maybe does differ from some women that I've dated from certain countries, or depending on what they're doing with their life. It's not just about the country that they're from. This could happen anywhere. But anyway, getting back to this story about this woman who I had dated, for her, going to the beach and being topless was quite a normal thing. But for me and my family and the countries that I've lived in, it's a bit outside of the norm. It's not something that I've ever thought about before. It's like, okay, fine, I know it exists in the world, but it was something that, it's not that I had a strong feeling, of course, that it should be, or of course that it shouldn't be. It was just kind of like, never thought about that this would be something that I have to think about between myself and a woman who I'm dating. Why would this be a topic of conversation? Because it's never happened with most of the women in my life, that this has never been a thing. So for this woman that I was dating at the time, that was actually a really big problem for her, that it wasn't such a major issue of concern for me, and that I didn't have a strong vocal opinion on the topic that agreed with hers. At least that's what I understood at the time, because this is something that was just a foreign concept to me. It's not like I haven't been to beaches where that is not a thing. It's just that if I am at a place like that, it is a little bit of a shock to me that it's like, oh, right, that's a thing in some parts of the world. I'm not a big beach goer to begin with. So the times when it's happened, I've just been a little shocked. And again, I'm not saying whether it should be a thing or it shouldn't be a thing. It's just different to me. But of course, when dating abroad, cultural expectations or non-cultural expectations, just expectations in general, talking about dating just in a basic sense between two people, sometimes it's worthwhile understanding how the other person communicates and what they communicate, or what they think that the other person needs to do. Even, for example, I knew someone in Italy who was dating a woman, not dating, but they were in a long-term relationship, a very committed relationship where they were living together. And, well, if you're living together, how committed is it really? I'm not judging. Just a little thing that, just as I'm saying, it's like, wait, hold on one second. Is that really? But you can be committed without necessarily being committed on paper. But the expectation of his girlfriend, his significant other, was that everything was split in half, exactly half. If the floor on the kitchen was going to be cleaned, It's like somebody drew a line down the center of the kitchen. She cleaned her half, he cleans his half. If there was a dish, she would clean her dish, he would clean his dish. If the bathroom was going to be cleaned, she had her half, he had his half. She would only do half, exactly like somebody had drawn a line down certain things. Whereas for me, for example, and also for this guy, we both had a mindset that, yes, things can be split and things can be shared, but not as though you've drawn a line that maybe one person does one thing, one person does the other thing. If you're going out for a meal, that maybe one person pays one time, one person pays the other time, and then everything from there is figured out in a different sense. Maybe not having everything exactly divided, but divided roughly speaking, that maybe if someone pays to go out for dinner, the other person pays for the groceries, or somehow they pool their money together for the groceries and just figure it out like that. There are, I think, ways of splitting things without saying, all right, that is your half of the kitchen floor, this is my half of the kitchen floor. But then even when you're getting to know somebody, how much about that person, or even the subjects that you can get to know about them, can be quite different about how you approach or when you approach certain topics. I mean, even I've known people in Italy and here in Portugal as well, that there's this kind of, and actually funny enough, I was talking about this with someone the other day as well, that when you're first getting introduced to somebody, a very American thing is like, oh, what do you do for work? Whereas in this part of the world, both in Italy and Portugal, that it's kind of almost like it can be a little bit of a rude thing. It's almost like asking somebody how much they make. And even the other day when I was speaking to this person about this, they lived in North America and had said that it was something that always used to annoy them, that like your social interaction was based on your work, and if your work interested the other person, it was basing your value on what you are, not who you are, not your personality and what makes you you. It was making the assumption based on what it is you do in your professional life. I mean, okay, there are some people who really, there's not much of a separation. I'll admit I'm somewhat one of those people. My work is part of me and I am part of my work, that there's an intertwining there, but of course there's a separation. But to judge me based on my work, I wouldn't say that necessarily would be a fair thing to do as well. So I can understand, and that's something where even in dating, that how you approach that subject or other subjects that may be unrelated could be something that you have to think about. When do you approach? Why do you approach? Or when is it appropriate to talk about certain topics and to be able to learn about that person? Because I mean, say if you are wanting to live with someone and move in with them, well, is that normal in your culture and is it normal in their culture? Because for some cultures, you might not do that. That might just be a complete taboo. And that if you're moving in together, that means you're married already, that you're getting married, that you're in that process, that you've already walked down the aisle. Well, there may be even cultures where it's not an aisle that you walk down at all. And the last thing that I do want to talk about is about who you are and what is important to you, and recognizing that. Again, I think this is a basic thing when it comes to dating and just relationships in general. That something that I unfortunately see a lot of, and something that I've seen a lot in my time living abroad, is that people will take on a persona in their new country, and they become someone different. They become someone new, and it's not necessarily true to who they are. And if you're starting to date someone, if you're finding yourself looking at that potential idea of forever, that romanticized idea, is it fair to both yourself and the other person that they have met this new version of you? Because I'll say I'm of the opinion that everybody always is the same no matter what. Okay, we can grow and we can expand on who we are, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we are who we are, and there are certain things about us that are just simply innate. And like I was mentioning before, there are some people who just look at moving abroad in a certain way, that maybe they don't take things so seriously, or they don't look at everything in front of them. And maybe they're just wanting to get swept off of their feet, not just by the location, but another person. And there are people who do go to other parts of the world specifically to fall in love, on the hunt for somebody to meet and either bring home or to stay in that country with. I mean, there are reasons why shows like 90 Day Fiancé exist. Yeah, this is going to be a show that I'll definitely say that when I'm watching it, sometimes you see there are these red flags, these major red flags that pop up. And I've seen these in real life with people where they're either having to prove something, or they're wanting just to hold on to the idea of someone. And this is something that's not connected to just dating internationally. This can happen in your own hometown. I've seen this happen before, that there are sometimes these ideas that you build up of another person that just are not part of reality. And sometimes they may be because of what the other person has done, and they may be because of you and yourself. This gets back to what I was saying before about this new persona that I've seen so many people develop, that you have to be very careful with. Is it true to you? Is it true to yourself? And are you ignoring certain things that would be red flags on yourself and on the other person? And this again comes back to where I was talking about before about being open-minded. You have to be open-minded to their culture and to be able to see the real person that is in front of you. And you also have to be able to see the real person that you are yourself. But at the same time, the other person has to be able to accept you for you as you are. They can't expect you to be the number one patriot of their country and becoming the top model citizen of their culture. I've had that happen to me, and actually that was one thing that there was a woman who I had dated once who she was from another part of the world, very different culture, very different thing, and she said, well, men in my country are like this, and they do this, and they do that. And so after a while I said, look, I mean, if you're going to be comparing me to men from your country, then what are you doing with me? If I am not living up to these expectations of what the perfect man is supposed to do and the way he's supposed to be, then what are you doing with me? And of course, in that moment, that woman was trying to convince herself that's not actually what she wanted. And then it took her a little bit of time to realize that, yeah, maybe I had a point, that if she was bringing this up so often, it's like either you take me as me, or you find someone that you're looking for who meets those standards. But anyway, dating abroad, moving abroad, living abroad, finding love abroad is a very large topic that I think I will leave more for another day. I've talked a little bit about this in the past as well, but just for now, I'm going to finish it off here. So thank you all so much for joining for this episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Of course, especially a huge thank you to those of you who helped to make these episodes possible through Patreon, as well as the one-time donations, both here and through rafaeldefuria.com/support, and the thanks button here on YouTube. Really, thank you all so much for being a part of this and helping to support this project to be able to move forward. And of course, a thank you to those of you who help share these episodes, who have something to say down in the comment section below and get involved in the conversation. Of course, I'm always very interested to hear your thoughts, and even whether you agree with me or disagree with me. It's always very interesting to go through these topics. Anyway, as always, stay safe and healthy out there. I'm Rafael Defuria. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. May you find a life full of happiness, love, and joy, and all that fluffy stuff. And I'll see y'all next time. Later.